Is there a motion to approve the agenda as distributed?
Motion to approve it.
So moved by Mitchell. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Nate. Perfect. All in favor of approving the agenda, aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries and the agenda is approved. We'll read the opening statement. And again, if you want to read along with the opening statement, is the last page of the bylaws. Welcome all to the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan Steering Committee meeting. This committee is made up of independent volunteer citizens. The makeup of the committee was determined by the mayor and city council. The committee is not part of the city administration. The steering committee is served in our efforts by the City of West Des Moines staff. The committee's purpose is to partner with the City of West Des Moines to build interest, excitement, awareness, and community consensus around a comprehensive strategy for historic West Des Moines by representing the diverse interests of current businesses, residents, and investors. Number two, work towards updating the master plan to address growth and redevelopment going forward into the future. Three, make recommendations and provide guidance to the City Council on matters pertaining to the creation, revising, and implementation of the Historic West Des Moines Master Plan. It is our goal that the meeting is orderly. We encourage discussion, but recognize the fact that there will be differences of opinion. We request that everyone is shown mutual reverence and discussions are conducted in a respectful manner. To ensure the meeting does not become unnecessarily lengthy, we ask that everyone's testimony be focused on new facts or evidence not already presented. If you wish to speak, please come forward, wait to be recognized by the chair, and then state your name and address for the record. Rules for public comment. Speaking, members of the public should state their name and address prior to making their comments. Each member of the public will be given 5 minutes to speak. All statements at the meeting shall be directed to the committee, and cross-conversation among those in attendance is prohibited. Questions shall be directed first to the chair, who may then ask the proper person to answer, with such answer also being directed to the committee. When the opportunity for public comment is closed, public may only address the committee if the question is directed to them. In closing, this committee does not make final decisions. All recommendations made will be forwarded to the Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council final action. All right. So then next we'll go to Citizens Forum. If there's anyone in the audience that wants to speak, address the committee pertaining to anything not on the agenda tonight, now would be the time to do that. Is there anyone that wants to speak? Not at this time? All right, hearing and seeing nothing, then we'll go ahead and close Citizens Forum. Since we do have a meeting tonight, Clyde suggested that we take this opportunity to get some food. They have laid out a spread for us. Would that be a good time now that you suggested, Clyde?
Yeah, that would be the time. There's also, most of the sandwiches are numbered. There's a chart right there. There's a bunch there that aren't numbered, so I think just need here there are.
Okay, well, there's a whole stuff that's not numbered. So if you want a little mystery here, there's supposed to be ham, turkey, veggie, roast beef. So we're gonna sit this down.
I can't eat roast.
Vegetarian.
There's a lot of. You wanna? Then Michael gets started.
And there's no mustard or mayo on the temperature for the whole thing.
Okay.
And for those at home, bear with us as we go through this.
Dang it.
How you doing?
I'm eating and listening to Mike. We'll go ahead and get started if we
As soon
could.
as possible.
Well, I'm glad to be back in person tonight. Sorry about last night, but I think it was a good discussion. Enjoyed hearing all the comments and it was awesome. We're going to pick up right where we left off last night, which was talked about parking utilization. Surveyed the area. Friday and Saturday. Look at how many spaces we use throughout the area, just to get a good idea of what's really happening in the area. I think it was actually a pretty good representative days. The Saturday was absolutely beautiful. Downtown is packed, and so we got a good. I want to kind of talk you through that so we have a good understanding. Yeah, not a lot of vacancy. Right now. Upper story that's not heavily utilized, but pretty well built out and occupied. But I think it is, except for thinking about some of the new projects. So, we have mapped all the parking that is in the downtown area. 1,000 spaces in the area. Some of that's private, some of it's public, a bit of it. There are signs out there regulating the number of hours you can park in different areas. I think you all probably know this doesn't particularly enforce those hours right now. But those signs are in place and that could be. What we did was we kind of summarized what's happening by block in terms of parking, because we thought, well, maybe there's a problem in some areas of the downtown, but maybe not in other areas. And that kind of, we want to make sure. We identified 8 blocks in total, 7, 8, 9, the higher numbers are at the 100 block, and you can see kind of going up what we did in each block. We separated between what's happening on street and off street lot spaces, so that we had a good documentation of that. We actually went out every hour and counted the number of spaces that were occupied in each of these different zones. It is important to note, I think, and we'll talk about it, you'll see it, some of the numbers and some of the information, but obviously there was construction going on at the time, particularly near the intersection there. It's at all that's right. So there was construction vehicles parked there, which were actually occupying some details, customers in the future. So that kind of thing. All that is to say, here's kind of what we found. First of all, this is looking at weekday use on street parking, right? So parking that are right on street and pretty available. What we found was a couple of things, and probably what you would guess, right? And when it's busiest in the area, the build up on street spaces is lunchtime, right? And have lunch, and then dinner time. Those are kind of your 2 peaks for on street parking in the area. At no time were all the on-street parking spaces filled up in the area. On survey. However, they were, right? So you easily miss a space when you drove by. Now there's usually always space behind in the off-street lots. The on-street is fairly full at certain times, particularly at lunch hours and the. There's a boatload of data there.
Can you move a little closer to the mark?
Close with the microphone?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It says that it's cutting in and out.
Not you.
All right. Is that any better for the people that are online? Well, we'll assume
find
it
out.
is. All right. So anyway, a lot of data there. You've got it in your hands. Take a look at it at your leisure. If you got questions, let me know. But basically what it was showing was there are some times when it's pretty crowded at the south end of the district. Generally, not farther the north you go, the less congested it was in terms of on-street parking, and clearly a peak during meal times.
Mike, if you would, make everybody aware of the key numbers on the side refer to the block.
Sure, absolutely. So B1 through B9 are the blocks. It is all color coded too on the map, so you can kind of go back and forth and look at the color coding on those things. I'm just kind of trying to give you guys an overview because we got a lot of stuff to get through tonight, but feel free to go back. If you have questions on it later, shoot us an email, give us a call, something we'd be happy to get into that. All right, so. So, off-street parking lots. All right, so these are the public and private lots essentially behind the main buildings on Fifth and other locations. You can see again, a similar peak between 12 and 1. But in this case, generally speaking, we had more spaces available at that. And the 100 block, we did have 93% of the spaces filled. So mostly in that 100 block, we did see some of those areas peaking at lunchtime. But other lots generally were no more than 2/3 filled, I would say, generally. So there was, at least during the week, quite a bit of on-street or off-street parking that was available to anybody that wanted to come into the area and find a place.
Like, is that both private and public?
Yes. Okay, on-street parking on the weekend. This is the one spot where we did a hit 100%. And then again, that's the 100 block down there. People first come into the area and as soon as they see the spot, they jump on it, right? So we did hit 100% there. Even then, when we get to the off-street time, there's some available spaces there. But again, on weekends, it's around 1 o'clock, so slightly later than during the week. But that sounds kind of busy. I'm into the area, yes. Meredith, in terms of your shop, when's it busiest? I'm just curious.
12 to 2.
Okay, so there you go.
Lunches happen either before or after that period.
I figured. So anyway, that's what you see. But what you're seeing here too is that there generally is on-street parking at most times, except for those peak lunchtime hours on the weekend. And then the off-street lots, again, a similar thing, busiest to the farthest to the south, and less so. But in general, what we were saying was quite a bit of available spaces. This is just a summary slide of some of the key points that we have here. Peak times, again, lunch hours, dinner times. Peak weekend time is 12 to 2, but we're peaking at 1. A little uptick around 6 o'clock in the evening. Block 7 and 8 usually have the highest occupancy rates, which 7 and 8 and 100 blocks, so farthest to the south. Farther to the north, usually had high occupancy rates in the morning. You know, obviously, the area around St. Kilda's on the weekend during brunch time, right? Because it's their peak time. So, but there's always space usually north of that. Around the post office is obviously busy when the post office, kind of things that you would expect. But the bottom line, there seems to be sufficient parking for normal activities and operations in the area. You will always get people that feel that there's, you go to a shopping area and you can't find a space immediately. You think there's a parking problem. But the reality is what we're seeing in this area is that you might have to circulate just a little bit. You're going to be able to find a parking space both during the week and on the weekend based upon what is out there today.
Is there a typical percentage that we should, 85%, not to exceed that, or?
Yeah, parking, the traffic engineers usually like to look at a number of around 90% or so is perceived as being full, even if it's not. So that's ideal. And honestly, from my perspective, you never want a situation where you never have a parking issue, because then you probably built too much parking, right? It's kind of a balancing act, right? You get more value out of the property if you get a building on it, and then you got a parking lot. You got to have parking lot to support the business. So it's a balancing act, but you don't want an overabundance of parking. You don't want giant Walmart parking lot in your downtown. Just it's not engaging an active space, right? So you want balance.
What weekend was the parking study done?
November 5th, 4th and 5th, I think.
November 4th and 5th, okay.
And you're right, that was a busy weekend
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it was a beautiful day. There's people out
Yeah.
all over the place.
It was very high traffic through all the businesses down there, so.
Like
That's
typically,
good to
in a
know.
downtown area like this, typically walk, they have to park somewhere where they, okay, I can't park in front. I gotta park a little ways away from where I want to go.
They'll walk the adjacent block, I would say that's not a problem. They probably wouldn't walk most often from the 100 to the 400 block, but if you wanted to go something on the 100 block and it's on the 200 block, you can certainly do that.
So something within a football field length,
Yeah.
350 feet or so.
Yeah, about that. Yep, that's good. So those are some of the highlights. Then we did want to pay attention to the new development that's happening in this area. Some of it is a little bit more intense than what was there previously, right? So that might increase demand. Reality is your code right now doesn't require parking in the historic Valley Junction Business District, right? So technically there is no parking requirement and some of these developments aren't providing any parking. Some of them did provide a little bit of parking. So we did look at what would happen. Provide standards, other areas of the area, just to look at parking generation for everything. Kind of a worst case scenario. The 4 major projects that are going on, we really kind of discounted the First National Bank redevelopment in terms of parking calculations because they are providing on-site parking that's probably sufficient for what they need. So I don't really think that's going to have any impact on the overall parking demand. And really they're replacing something that was there previously anyway. So it's really not new parking. But certainly when we're adding two-story buildings with mixed use in there, a lot of that is more intense than what was there previously. So it probably will create some additional demand for parking. So we looked at each of the different developments in terms of the square footage that they were having, the number of new units that were being added. Right now in the code, if you are other than in the historic Valley Junction Business District, you'd be required 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet retail commercial space. And the scale, the 1.5 spaces, I think, per unit if it's an efficiency or smaller unit. If it's a 2 unit, I think it was 1.75, so it's slightly higher, but I just did math on 1.5 to look at that and see what's happening in the area to kind of calculate it. So you see from 315, if you apply that standard, you need 39 spaces. It's a little covered up at the bottom, but it's around 30 spaces for the project. In total, all these sum to about 90 spaces. In the area, you apply that higher standard. Now, I will tell you from my experience, that is really more parking than you would need for these developments. Probably don't generate demand for 1.5 spaces for residential. One better standard. We're thinking a scenario here. 2, this doesn't consider any kind of shared parking, which I think is kind of a better standard for it. Kind of scale back the parking requirement because there is some sharing of uses between the retail and the residential and those kind of things, and between different uses that have got different peak hours of activity. You saw from our chart that down, right? So different uses generate. A restaurant generates higher demand at dinner time, right? And not so much at other times. And the same thing for other uses that might be counter to that. So you need to consider all those things. So go back to the map.
While we're getting that unfroze, one of the things I wanted to find out was we have one building that's fully occupied right now with the apartments, and that's 329. And so I wondered, okay, where are these people parking? So I actually came at 4 o'clock in the morning because I figured, okay, everybody's going to be home if they're going to be home. And where are they going to be parking? There was one car parked out in front of the building. Most of the parking spots on Walnut Street, west of 5th Street, those were occupied. And then surprisingly, the parking lot behind 304 5th Street, in other words, on 6th Street, there were like 5 or 6 cars parked in there. And so I was kind of surprised, but evidently people are parking there and walking. Otherwise, either people weren't home at all, which I out, or there may be some people that don't have a car, which is a possibility, or, that's basically where all the tenants are parking. So they're not taking parking on 5th Street. They're parking in parking lots, it appears. But that's not a verifiable study. That's more of just observation, because I wanted to know, okay, do we have a bunch of people parking on 5th Street that possibly live in the apartments? So
My question is, what happens on the weekend?
well,
They all stay in those spots?
this was on a Sunday morning. So
The other thing I think you have to consider is we're starting to get lots of office space. Just like the gentleman was here last night, Yeah, and he said, I think 10 people will be parking. You start adding all this up, 10 here, 10 there, 20 here, we're gonna have a problem down the road, and I think we're gonna have to acquire parking space. I mean, I paid for a lot of these parking lots and assessments. So I feel that people that are coming in and doing new buildings and stuff should participate in paying for parking somehow. That's just my 2 cents.
I think that's a really good point. I was talking to the owner of Red Dot the other day, and he has 11 staff members that all
Yeah.
park in that the 7 block. The one that's right behind the 100 block on the west side, and then you have Studio Melee that's parking in the 100
And we're
block.
getting a lot more of that, so it's gonna rear up.
That,
Oh, yeah.
that lot in block 7 was probably the most off-street lot in any of them.
Because we've always been a thing where people come down, park, do their thing, turn over. But I'm concerned when people come at 8 in the morning and they don't leave till 6 at night. That's gonna be,
Question.
Yeah.
You indicated we had 1,065 existing spaces, all right?
Yeah.
So based on the use of the median, it's 105 spaces, which is at 10%, which puts us at peak capacity exceeding 90%. If the buildings that are going up we take that space.
Well, but keep in mind that there was some use that was there previously, right? So we would need to subtract out, probably the equivalent of a single-story building, whatever, right? So it's not all new demand. So it's scaled back a little bit from that. And that number that I showed there of 90 some odd new spaces is not looking at shared parking between different uses too. So that's scaled back a little bit. All that's to say, in my opinion, I don't think these new projects are going to create a significant parking problem for you now. Now, if you added 3 more projects like those, you're getting into issues. So we are getting close to the point where we should be concerned about it. But I think you've got to, put a balance today.
Based on the numbers, I think we're right there, aren't we?
Yeah, well, you're close. So in terms of what's going to happen with these new projects, there is space right now in block 3 for some additional parking. There is space in block 6 for some additional off-street parking for these people. So I think they're not going to be about right in front of the house, right? They're going to have to park on the off-street lots. But I think, now, having said that, I can tell you from, and maybe we want to consider this, I don't know. I just wrote a parking code for another downtown community, right? And similar to you, for commercial uses, I didn't require them to provide any additional space. But for residential uses, I did require them to provide 1 off-street space per unit. Now, that didn't have to be necessarily on their site. They just need to have a agreement in place that their resident can park off-site or something like that. And that's maybe something we want to think about going forward, because I do think that is kind of permanent parking. And honestly, if I were buying it, I might want to know that I've got an available parking space somewhere that I can, have a claim to essentially, right? So we might want to think about that kind of thing.
The possibility would exist, like when we develop in the communities around here, you got to provide a certain percentage to park space. The idea of maybe a residential construction would require a certain amount of space.
Yeah, we could do that. Worth thinking about. But in general, at least today, there seems to be adequate parking in the area and, available spaces in front of all the businesses, except that, that peak period, and under block, it really isn't on-street parking, but there is available off-street parking. So, bottom line, there's not a huge parking issue today, but if we go forward, we add additional density, then we need to be looking at no parking.
It was kind of interesting too, that I noticed that during the day, how the parking has shifted, like the 200 block, where you got more restaurants at the north end and you got fewer restaurants in the south end. And so the south end where it had all the retail earlier in the day, that's all those parking spaces were taken and any available spots were in the north end. Then close to dinner hour, it south end, north end was.
Yeah.
And this is all going to change obviously over time, right? This is a business district where businesses go in and go out, right? So if you add a new restaurant here, then may shift the mix, on that block. So it is going to be an evolving thing. So we have to keep that in mind too. That's
And as you're speaking of parking, you're not speaking as what would be required or setting standards for the residential area. It's in Valley Junction area, we have, different parking. Requirements. A lot of properties do not have driveway approaches, so they may, park on the street. So are you looking at the residential and possibly changing that?
Obviously, but in terms of the overall project, yes.
Because I,
If there's particular areas, the neighborhood, the overall, historic Valley Junction neighborhood, if you have some parking problems, point those out.
I think for some residents, what we have found in the past is that there's not that capability to park like in the driveway. There's no driveways, no driveway approaches, so they do more on the street. And I just would be interested to see how that's handled. I wouldn't want it to restrict the residents to have to find or to build or construct an approach or something off the alley. No, it's working now. Yeah, I would say.
I'm definitely not trying to advantage yourself. But I was talking about adding a requirement for one space per unit. Particularly with multiple. What I was really thinking about. That's
Okay.
the concern that I've heard repeatedly in the area about the impact of apartments, parking demand. I guess what I'm saying from our professional opinion, the ones that have been added so far, I don't think to add them, it'd be let's find some mechanism to create some more.
Had your hand up earlier. Did you have something?
Yeah, I had a couple different questions. I guess I'm trying to think where to start. With multifamily and parking, the study that you've done, it looks like you looked at the times from 9 in the morning till 7 at night. Would you say in general, an apartment requires parking more so overnight than during the day? Or there's some, as you mentioned, sort of like shared, like sharing of uses sort of, and some efficiencies there?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the world is changing right now, right? More people are working home during the day and that kind of thing. But traditionally, the peak demand for an apartment project would be, probably more like 7 PM to 7 AM overnight.
Sure.
Yeah. Which, obviously is more or less opposite of when the peak demand is for most of the retail uses. That's where I was talking about the shared parking thing. So that, even though we're hitting 90% at certain times, when the apartment demand is picking, it's the opposite of that. So it's not sort of big a problem.
Cool.
In other areas that we worked in, kind of like the urban settings, are you finding that less people have cars? I was recently reading about how like driver's license rates have declined in like younger generations. And if that's kind of our demographic that are living in these apartments, from back in the late 80s when it was 77% were having driver's license, now it's down to like 46% in that age demographic. So
Absolutely. Now, my office is in the Chicagoland area, right? So it's a little different. All right. No question about it. But we've got people in our office that don't own cars. They just take public transportation. And I will say nationally, the trend is to look for walkable neighborhoods like this where you don't have to be as dependent on a car. Now, all that said, I still can't imagine living here and not having one car at least per family. You might not need two, but I think you're still gonna want one, right?
I think we've seen a big uptick too, also in ride sharing, in terms of Uber and Lyft.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, and I think one thing that led a lot of the people in my generation and above to have that car was went to the grocery store. You had the grocery getter. Well, now they deliver. So that kind of takes away that a little bit too. So it'll be interesting to see how.
But doesn't that then bring up the issue about the accessibility to public transportation?
Sure.
Particularly in the Valley Junction area? Because there's been changes in schedules, and I could be wrong, but I think there's maybe 2 buses that come, one in the morning then one at about 4 or 5,
Please.
correct? In the Valley Junction, it'll go to Valley West Mall, et cetera. But to me, it seems like then we would need to look at public transportation.
Absolutely, we do. I did the last time. I was at this time.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, anything on parking?
Uh,
Talk about.
Steve, before we open those.
A few things, and this is an area of passion of mine. So, I think noting that it's typically younger people, smaller single or two-family households living in the multifamily stuff within the business district, I think is accurate. And they're probably not going to be driving as much. And they don't have a suburban mindset. They live in this area because they like having freedom from a car. And I do live in the district, and my car is parked for 5 days a week. I drive it on the weekends, and that's it. And having to walk half a block to where my car is parked. Well, I think that's the way our district is laid out. We have so many businesses in a very small footprint, 12 and a half feet wide, 5 feet wide. So there's a lot to walk past. It really does draw you. So it doesn't feel like walking across the Walmart parking lot. It's more interesting walking. So I think that helps. I think, obviously making sure that walkability is accessible to all people is really important. But, what I've seen living and working down here is they're really, people are patient about parking. I don't see an issue with it. I feel like if there was an issue, we wouldn't have a 4-hour parking limit on Fifth Street that even on top of that does not get enforced. I know of a few business owners who park in front of their business, almost as a sign, and they say their customers know that I'm open because they see my car parked in front of my business. And the other thing that comes to my mind too is so much of our time up here has been spent talking about building preservation and that kind of thing. And so I think we need to realize in a restricted geographic area, if we're talking about adding parking, we're talking about tearing down buildings. We are not growing more land within those 8 blocks. So it's got to give at some point. So that's why I'm definitely not a fan of parking minimums. I think letting development and residents work it out, I think is important within that district. And you really have 3 constituencies. You have the people who live in the district, people who work in the district, people who visit the district. And there's never going to be a time when all 3 of those constituencies are satisfied. We really do have to find a balance. But I think it's important to note that adding parking means more buildings in that gray area get torn down.
Absolutely. And I guess the other thing I would add that I didn't say already is if there did become a parking problem, step 1 is probably to go back and reinforce your hours of parking, right? We've got 2 offices at my firm, one's in suburban Plainfield, one's in suburban Evanston in different areas. Both of them enforce parking hour regulations. So as an employee perspective, I rent a spot in a lot, a couple block away and walk the block. I don't care. It's fine, right? I got a spot and I'm good. So that those hour regulations do keep those spaces open for the retailers and keep those turning over. So if you did need to worry about it, that would be the logical first step in my mind. Just to look at something worth it. You don't need to, don't. I'm not saying start now. You don't need to start now. The numbers don't, you need to do it now. If it became a worse problem going forward, that would be the first thing I would look at.
Any other comments from the committee before we go to public here? No? Okay. Nick, do you have your comment?
What's the city gonna have to do to accommodate for EV?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We need to do that, right? I didn't see anything here. I don't think there's one anywhere in this district, is there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, we definitely want to provide some opportunity for that, and the city's got lots to do that. I don't know if you've talked about it or not, but I would certainly encourage the city to look at providing a charging station somewhere in one of these lots.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, it's been brought up, and I think that folks are really looking to have the city really evaluate that possibility, because there's more and more constituents that are really wanting that, so.
absolutely. I mean, and
So
particularly in shopping
to be
districts,
progressive as a
it's a
city.
big deal to have that available to you.
Yeah,
For sure.
We've
yeah,
had
so we have heard it.
conversations with people about that.
Yeah.
Because they're going to dig into that space.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, anything else? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm curious, it's tighter, enforcement obviously is one, like you said. I'm curious if you have any insights or thoughts on, actually charging for parking. Since obviously people make different decisions if it costs money. Whereas free parking is, like, I was leaving my car there.
Yeah. The planning literature would say that's absolutely a good thing to consider. Having worked with a lot of small business owners and people that are used to free parking, you will get a lot of pushback on that. I look at that as kind of a last resort, honestly. I'm not a big fan of, in a shopping environment like this anyway. If you're talking about, downtown Des Moines, okay, sure, absolutely. But here, I would not really want to go in that direction unless we had to. Now, that said, if it does mean that, you're paying to rent a space for your house because you really just want to have a guaranteed spot for your house, okay, that's fine. But in terms of putting parking meters, well, first of all, you probably wouldn't do parking meters. You'd probably have a box in one of those systems now rather than parking meters. Go that route along Fifth Street or some of these other districts. I guess that would be definitely after enforcing the hours, then maybe look at some kind of a fee system, but hope we don't have to go. That would be my thought.
What they've typically found is that the expense of trying to manage that
That would be horrible.
is much more expensive than the benefit that you get from, enforcing the parking. Because if you're not going around checking the meters, making sure that if there's a meter that hasn't been expired, you waste a lot of money putting meters in for no reason. So then you've got all this enforcement that you're doing, and that gets very, very expensive. It'd be easier to us go buy some property somewhere and put more parking in.
It depends on the scale of your downtown, right? At times, I know I've done some work in Dubuque, right? Dubuque is a hawk at this stuff, right? But they've got a whole department that does it, and it's much bigger, and they've got enough areas to police that it works economically. In this small of an area, it would be tough to make it work economically, like Clyde said.
And it would almost be to the point of putting like a structured parking, taking one of the existing parking lots and putting a second level to it would probably be cheaper than putting parking meters in, and trying to enforce it.
Any other comments?
All right, so guideline districts. We spent a lot of time last night looking at different areas, and if you remember, out into different character areas. We talked about mixed use areas, we talked about transitional areas, about the area along Railroad. We're gonna have to draw some lines about where we apply those standards, so we need to talk about that. But in general, what we're talking about here is the different areas of the study area have different character, right? So applying the same standards to the middle of a residential block versus the mixed use block don't sound. Yeah, some differences in the area that relate to the character that we're trying to do and reinforce kind of the character that we've got in the area. Brad, I just lost my display. All right.
More sandwiches?
Hey,
Let's call for sandwiches. If you want done sandwiches, come get
Can I
it.
get them there too?
Last.
In your case study.
okay. Okay.
50% chance.
I think I'm in order.
I don't like hams. I'm hungry there. Well, keep eating.
Where are you talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Here's my parking.
Built some stuff when I did it. Pick it up and when I slid it sideways, I spilled everything.
To be right behind you.
Yes.
Okay.
Didn't already reckon.
The notebook.
Go get it. Go beat up on it.
All right, everybody, we got it.
I need to, okay, I need to find this.
We're going.
I gotta find it in
Okay, so last meeting, one of the things came up about the actual historic district and how do we define historic and those kind of things. I didn't want to kind of.
Okay.
That, we're talking about it.
That's that. Okay.
Hey, guys, I think we're,
Wait,
everyone have their attention to Mike, please.
I'm trying to find the handouts here.
We showed this map previously, but this is your kind of National Register district, which is primarily on the 1 to 200 blocks, but does push up a little bit into the 300 block. I guess the way I would look at this is we're going to develop these guidelines, which are overall and covering a bigger area. Those guidelines will apply to both the buildings that are contributing and those that are not contributing. If you have a contributing building, and particularly if you're going through historic tax credits and those kind of things, you have a whole level beyond these design guidelines to get a deal with, right? Because you're trying to do something that is consistent with the character of this building, right? So if you're going tax credits particularly, you're gonna have to comply with all the regulations for that, and it'd be kind of another level of standards beyond what we're even doing in these kind of things, right? And probably have a little bit less, right, much more consistency with the historical character of those buildings that are contributing. Let's face it, that those contributing buildings are contributing to the character of the area. We want to keep them relatively consistent with what they look like or what they were developed as originally, right? At least in terms of the outside appearance of the structures. So that's kind of how I would look at it, as kind of almost an additional layer if you are in a contributing building in the historic district above and beyond what we're going to be defining in the guidelines that we're doing here. Does that make sense? The other thing I want to point out to you is we looked at all kinds of slides of the commercial district, the transitional areas, the area along railroad. We didn't really get into the residential areas, which are really the bigger part of the area, but the city has done that. They have a wonderful pattern book that looks at the different architectural styles, looks at ways that you could add on to your house and be consistent with the style of home, those kind of things. So we're not spending a lot of time doing that because I don't want to duplicate work that's already been done. But if you haven't had a chance to go look at that, take a look at that pattern book. It really does have some good information in it, and it does provide good guidance for development within our larger study. So all that is to say, what I've done tonight is I've kind of come up with 3 different maps. I'm guessing we'll end up with some combination. I kind of talk through the different options that I've got here so that we can begin the discussion, right? So I'm going to kind of go through 3 different options and come back, and we're going to do an old-fashioned polling by raising your hand, which one you like the best of the 3. We're going to talk about that and try to refine those lines, because I would like to come out tonight with some pretty good understanding myself, at least, of where we want to kind of draw some boundaries. We've got 5 different zones on this map here, right? MUC stands for mixed use commercial. That's kind of your historic Valley Junction business district as it is today, with a few other additional blocks. That's kind of the red that you see here. This is showing it basically up to Walnut, the 300 block. It includes the couple buildings along the north side of Walnut. It does not go all the way up to Vine as the existing zoning district does. I've heard lots of people that they don't want to do that. We don't want to continue that density that we've got on the 300 block up on the 400 and 500 block. If you guys want to do that, talk to me. We can think about it. But that's not what I've been hearing from the community. So I've skipped back at least in this concept to go about that far north. Then I've got the transitional district going the rest of the way up Vine to Vine. And then I've got 3 transitional areas on either side of that mixed use area in this concept. Railroad is pretty much what you would expect. The property that fronts along railroad. This concept going back about 3 lots. So all the way up. in here. And then we've got two other areas shown on this map, which we haven't talked a lot about yet. So we can get to, the C, which would be kind of the commercial or the areas that are right now zoned Valley Junction commercial. Along first here, and then MI, which we call mixed industrial. You've got areas obviously that are zoned, Valley Junction light industrial up there right now, right? So that's kind of what those are. I'm not envisioning speaking that in, but it's probably the areas that are already zoned that. We are not right now developing guidelines for that, commercial or that mixed industrial area, mainly because that's not where most of the pressure and the concern has been. We can come back and we can do that as part of this process, but to meet our Mark 1 deadline, I cut something out right now. So I'm not getting to those right now, but realize that we can add those as a part of the overall document before my contract is up and we're done working on this thing.
And also, Mike, for the remainder of the area within our study district that we don't highlight.
Thank you.
There is currently not a plan to change.
Right, that's why I was highlighting the pattern books. The pattern book kind of some of that anyway, in terms of the appearance and design, that kind of thing. Right? So we weren't planning on doing anything. And if you look at the development up at Brandon First, right? I don't know if you got design guidelines for that area or not, but it looks like you do. There's pretty consistent architecture in terms of the look and the buildings and whatever. I wouldn't want to mess with that.
There's a specific plan for that.
Yeah, so you've basically done that area, right? So I'm not going to reinvent that because it's working and it's done.
Excuse me, if I may. So you're saying there's some areas you may not be looking at on railroad?
No, pretty much everything on railroad we're going to look at.
Everything?
I'm saying farther north end of the neighborhood or along Grand, we're not going to be looking at that.
Areas that don't have any color on the current map will not have effective.
Thank you. Clarification.
The green and purple area, we're not going to deal with.
Right.
Okay.
And I guess the one thing I'll point out is I am showing some areas both north and south of railroad in this concept, right? Obviously, some of it's already developed, some of it's not. So we would apply some of the standards to that. Nick had a question. You want to wait, have him wait, or you want to?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Can you give me a brief definition of what the transition area is?
Pretty much what it says, right? The transition between the denser commercial area, essentially along Fifth right now, and the residential areas that are north, south, and east of that, right? So kind of a stepping down in intensity in mostly commercial development along Fifth and almost all residential on the other sides. In these transitional areas, we probably would have some mixture of uses, but it would be less intense, right? So simple way to look at it would be in terms of height, right? Maybe the transitional areas only go up to 2 stories versus maybe 3 potentially along Fifth, stepping down to some ranches in the more residential area. So it's getting back at intensity and density, transitioning between the more intense and the less intense.
Thank you.
We'll actually put definitions in the document, but thanks for asking that question. Okay, option B. This one, the big difference is that this is a little more aggressive in terms of looking at potential development along the railroad, extending that zone all the way up to Maple, which would be pretty significant. Wouldn't happen. Realize that none of this is happening overnight, right? But if we did this kind of approach, we'd be saying, eventually we'd be looking to intensify the development that happens out in those areas and expand that a little bit more. And otherwise, this is pretty similar. That the big difference there is expanding that railroad area, that concept. And then this is kind of a positive, some of those things were back that huge thing. But it extended it on up all the way to the 400 block up to Locust. It added some transitional area west, I guess, looking in the 7th and 8th blocks there south of Maple. And those are probably some of the differences in that concept. And again, I suspect we're gonna end up with some hybrid of all three of these, okay? So I'm not saying these are all magical ones, but I wanted to start with some different options and ideas. Any questions on any of this before we kind of go back and vote your preference, 1, 2, or 3? And then have a discussion on whichever one comes up the highest. Voted.
I have one question about the Railroad Avenue area and the southern particularly.
Yeah.
So I know that like we have some, like a bar like Fox Brewing is in the building that's on the other side of South 11th from the Railroad Avenue area. It's like when people talk about like Southern Railroad, the only two places they're really talking about are the hall and Fox Brewing. There's nothing else. A person who's not storing stuff, sheds are done there. I'm curious how you ended up with that blob and like.
I don't know, maybe I should push it all the way over to here.
No one's doing anything
Yeah.
down in that lobe of that area. So.
One development site, that is this piece right here.
Yeah.
That is available land. That, we're gonna get into zoning in a minute, but that's zoned for industrial use, storage, that kind of thing. I'm hoping to do something else, but, yeah, we probably should, pushing that.
There would be one other potential development piece on the west side where the south of World.
Yeah, we might want to go ahead and push that. That's good.
And
Is that flood mitigation area, the retention pond, is that necessary with all the changes now that we've had?
yeah,
It still is used. An important part of our flood plan.
yeah.
Okay.
Now, like, unfortunately, it's underneath the black box there. There is a vacant parcel on First Street south of the railroad tracks. Yeah.
That's you're talking about? Clay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That if we're going to expand the study area south of the railroad tracks, we probably need to include that too.
That makes sense? You guys want to include that?
Yeah, you talk about a hotel or something, that'd be a good location for that.
Probably, yeah.
Good point.
Build that, Ralph.
Is that?
If you want to build that, Ralph, I'll go in with you.
It's out of the way, it's by itself, it's isolated.
Let's make a water park out of the
So
retention.
some of these transitional areas, you got a lot of residential in them.
Yep.
Just a couple businesses. Wording on that, what protects residents through that area?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
Like 500 block of Fifth Street, I got probably businesses on that.
Mostly residential.
Yeah, it's probably 90% resident.
Right.
Wording of transitional, what protects those residents of that not being pushed out to more.
So that may be an area where we want to even create a new district. I haven't got to that yet, but we might, right? So I've created what I've called business transitional zoning districts, where it's mostly single family. It still allows you to convert a property to a business if you choose to, but you have to keep that single family residential character as you do that. Yeah, you have to look at some parking and make sure that that works. But you want to keep the character of that area still residential in terms of appearance anyway, even though it can still have some businesses associated with it. So it's going to be much more of a residential feel than you've got farther south along Fifth, right?
So Mike, you're talking about something on the 400 block where people have taken houses and converted them to businesses.
But it still feels like a residential block.
Like Red House.
It goes allowed for that, yeah. But I see that, at least in my mind, different than what you've got farther south. But right now, I'll say in zoning, I'm thinking we want to differentiate a little bit.
That would probably be my concern with the three options, because I've talked to a lot of residents up there and they don't want it to go to that commercial. Want to keep as much of that residential as possible.
That's kind of why I was doing it. That's why.
Yeah.
In that.
That's kind of why I asked it, because some of these areas you kind of get in that same mix.
So we're talking about changing, making recommendations, to change zoning possibly?
Yes,
Recommendations.
yes. Now, some of those changes might make sense to do now. Some of them might be just an option for the property owner if they choose to do it. That can rezone, and we'll get into that in a minute, but Right now, what we're talking about is, mostly, if we're jumping the gun a little bit on this discussion, but we're really talking about the design guidelines. We're gonna apply those guidelines to different areas, but obviously it's closely related, because if it's gonna be mostly ultimately residential, then you got one standard, and if it's gonna be mostly more mixed use commercial, then it's a different standard. So there is a correlation for sure. Okay, yeah. Mary.
A quick question. So does this affect the businesses that are up on Vine and Fourth then?
Well, no, you would still be allowed to have that in the transitional area, and we're certainly not gonna require anything to go away.
Because it would technically be outside of the transition lane that I'm.
We're not saying they can do commercial in a transitional area.
Right.
It's got a different standard than, say, the first three blocks of Fifth Street.
But if it's not in the transitional area that's highlighted? It's actually, it's right in the corner of Fourth and Vine.
About that one.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, hair salon and.
What option are you looking at?
Yeah, you're right.
Any of them, yeah.
There's two lots.
Looking at the yellow
Oh,
transition.
There's two lots on the west side of,
Fourth and
Street.
Vine.
Buying,
Yeah,
or actually cars.
yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That's what you're talking about.
yep.
Oh, there you go, Brad.
A little bit more.
Before we vote on any option, do they got any questions?
Yeah. Any questions from the audience at all?
I just need to understand, so,
Sure.
you know, my bias has been evident, I don't hide it. But, and so I do apologize for being so emotional when it comes to 11th and Railroad. And the properties that are there, because the history says that in the 90s, contamination was found by DNR and EPA, and it was a plume that came all the way into, I think it stretched, Project help me, if you know this, 10th and 11th into Holiday Park.
And then all the way south of the railroad tracks.
Okay, and different sources. It came from different sources. Most, and DNR came in and they did remediation best they could. So you do have some legal non-conforming uses in that area. And so that's why I hone in on that, because I'm real cautious about how can I be cautious about changing. Because I think it's only from 10th Street, probably to 11th Street on Railroad, that's residentially,
Where
owned residential.
live and
Yeah.
So it's legal non-conforming. But the point is that contamination in the different studies, different agencies, everyone came in, they were saying the best way to eradicate it is to discontinue use. So if we stay with the legal non-conforming status, you don't have to worry about an abundance of use that would stir up or allow businesses to possibly deposit chemicals. So I'm concerned about that changing. I don't want that to change. I don't think it's good for that area. Other area in West Des Moines may have that kind of issue. But so that's real particular to that
No, make
10th and 11th Street.
And I pulled up the zoning map just so it highlights what you're talking about, right? And it shows that on 10th and 11th, it is currently zoned single family, even though you can have some non-conforming uses in that
Yep.
area. And maybe we want to pull that railroad standard back so we stay out of that. Just keep it residential. That's entirely appropriate.
Yeah.
That's what you guys want to do. So, good point. Thank you. All right, let's go back. We ready to kind of take a straw poll here? All right, this is just your overall preference. There may be something on any of these maps you don't like, we'll come back and talk about that, but I do want to get some general indications.
I was just gonna ask, you're answering my question right now. We're basically just sort of like,
This is your general preference, okay? And we're going to come back to talk about specifics, right? So who prefers option A of the three, which is the best one?
I'm not,
Half.
I'm non-voting.
I thought that was what, like.
Option B, who likes option B the best of anything?
I'm non-voting, so.
Okay, we got one, we got two. All right. Option,
I'm not quite understanding.
He
okay,
doesn't understand.
all right, let me go back.
So when we're voting on these options, you're saying,
What we're gonna do is narrow it down to the options that, in terms of the colors, the arrangements there, that everybody kind of likes, but if there, then we're gonna get into that specific option and start tweaking boundaries of it.
okay, so when you're saying to look at the option is, this is how far we're gonna go.
Yeah.
To this, okay.
It's more like the maximum.
The areas that we're covering doesn't necessarily designate zoning, but the areas that we're looking. Understand?
Don't like that.
I understand.
People online.
I guess I just want a little definition. Like, that's the area that have that mixed residential homes. And I mean, point out a really good example of that. Yesterday, Meredith, Krista Vickers built a house that she did, the black and white house.
Yeah.
That was really a beautiful transition into the residential area.
Absolutely.
I think that's what you're talking about, with that RA, right?
All right, so we have one vote from, Steph for his option A.
Okay.
Should we try this?
1.5 for A. B, let's go back through them again.
I was gonna say, can we go back through them again? Maybe people are.
Actually, is it a matter of everybody understanding what each one of these districts
Yeah,
represent?
that's what Vicky's saying.
Yeah.
Is that, I think that's kind of what I overheard, is that right now we're seeing kind of colors on a map
Yeah,
and we can't associate it with what it actually, those uses are going to be. We'd explained a little bit what that transitional was, but maybe we can go through and talk
Yeah.
about the others.
yeah, I agree.
Okay, so mixed use commercial is what you essentially see right now on the 100, 200 and starting to be the 300 block of Fifth, right? It's mixed use commercial, potentially with residential or office kind of people involved, right? But it's probably more in the 2 to 3 story range as opposed to the single story range. Not saying you couldn't have a single story building, but probably leaning towards the higher the character of the area. Definitely mixed use where you've got residential and mostly, let's say probably 75% residential or 75% commercial or maybe residential. That's the kind of uses that you would see in the mixed use category. In the RA areas, that is probably the biggest range of uses. You could have some strictly commercial uses. You could have a 3-story mixed use building in that area. You could have a 2-story mixed use building in the area. Actually, you could even just have single family in that area. So that range in the.
I can kind of, so I'm understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the big difference between the mixed use and Railroad Avenue is mixed use is going to be more intense as far as, the central downtown of everything. While Railroad Avenue, that's when we have opportunities to have more kind of like almost more of a suburban print. So are we talking about these buildings having parking opportunities? Are we talking about deeper setbacks?
That's great.
That kind of, what are we?
So in the RA area, we're not going to have the benefit of all that city parking that's right adjacent to it, right? So each of those development areas are going to have to probably provide their own parking to some extent and address those kind of things as well. So I'm not proposing that we come in with city parking lots all along Railroad Avenue to accommodate this parking. We're going to have to cover that. So the site plan is going to look different in the RA area than it will in the mixed use area, because the mixed use area isn't providing additional parking because that parking is already provided.
So are we talking about for setbacks in the built environment? Are we talking about having those buildings that are 2 or 3 stories up closer to a railroad and having the parking behind it?
Probably.
Are we talking, yeah. And so that's kind of a little bit of a difference between that. So we can determine the difference between those sorts of things there. So continue.
No, that's good. Thanks.
And I'm going back to it. If, when you look at the RA, you really only have 10th, 11th, and 12th that have residential. But take a look at option B. You're saying that if it expands up to Maple Street, then it's possible there can be different types of uses
Yes.
in that residential neighborhood.
Right.
I
And,
think
and
though,
Hmm?
on,
By the way, Joe.
Second, Third and Fourth Street too.
Right.
third and,
You could have like a coffee shop on a corner, you could have rural housing, basically all those things that we liked yesterday. Integrated into that plan on Railroad, which is really a blighted area anyways.
it
It's
is,
just a long term, we're talking about years here, right?
Absolutely.
yeah. But you're moving it into Maple Street, so there's nothing in the 100 block on 10th, 11th, and 12th, but residential homes.
Correct.
That means
This-
it's buying it up and redeveloping the piece
This
of
is the
property.
most aggressive,
Mm.
right here.
Interesting.
And then again, to kind of, drive this home, none of these options are actually perfect right out the box.
Mhm.
Basically, what we're trying to do right now, out of the three, now that we understand the three zoning types that or use types that we're talking about, which one of this gets us the closest to where we want to be? We vote on that, then we start shaving and adding what's appropriate. So for example, Vicky brought up, her concern over on 10th and 11th Street. Maybe she appreciates option B, with the exception that there's some changes made over in that particular area. That's what the second part that we'd be handling. So why don't we, put some thought into which one you think is closest for us? That's what we'll vote on, and then we start shaving and working on that particular one from there.
Is there anyone online that has any questions or comments?
Well,
You understand that?
we had one just pop up.
I'm just, yeah, because when I look at this, I'm gonna look right at Vicky. I'm gonna say, hey, what's good for you? What do you see for the future? Because you have family there. Yeah, I mean, even though it's a small area there,
That's
you
all.
know, this is personal to you. And I used to live down there too, and I'd like to see, it remain residential where it's at and maybe with some additions and improvements. But I think, someone like Vicky has, she's got a definite interest,
And Cleo too, I'm trying to think outside the box. I just don't know how those residents in that 100 block, and again, unique, 10th and 11th Street actually, because 12th Street, part of it is light industrial. But in that 100 block, there's only residential homes. I can't vision multifamily units, but that's what we're talking about, that possibly,
Well, that's one of the
you
options.
never know.
Don't have to go there. Just saying that's one of the
Or
options.
somebody buys a house and converts it to an office.
And so we have Debbie actually had her hand up. It's kind of hard to see who's talking as I have the display going, so I've been checking my phone with it. So Debbie, if you want to unmute yourself and give your comment.
Brad, you want to?
Thank you. A couple minutes ago, you did a really quick shift between two of the options. And that was really helpful to see how they compare to each other. If I could have 3 shots, one of each, right kind of in a row, it would be easier to understand visually the differences. And I'm wondering if you could just, also the sound is kind of uneven. So it's a little bit harder to process, but if we could just have a one sentence or very, very brief summary between the essential core differences of the 3 options, it would sure help me. I'm not sure about the other people online, but maybe it would help us be on the same footing.
Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate that.
Mike, and to that end, I think probably the biggest differences in the maps is the Railroad Avenue band.
Yes.
And then there's some minor tweaking for the TR area and the MUC area, but primarily it's Railroad Avenue, isn't it?
That's
Yeah.
probably the biggest difference in all of them. Yeah, exactly. And now the other difference is this one expanded the transitional a little bit farther up by the Phoenix school site, a little bit, usually, on the frontage there along 6th. So
And also we're looking at, the difference between the mixed use commercial. It's a matter of, do we like it to be more linear as far as going up towards Vine, or do we want it to spread a little bit more? One option that you could think about is that if you spread a little bit more, when we talk about parking and convenience of how we use it as Midwesterners, we like to be a little bit closer. So if I have to walk long blocks, it may be a little bit easier to make it a little wider So I have to walk shorter blocks to get back to that central Fifth Street hub. So that's just kind of an option of how to kind of look at things as well too.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So if you think about this area, when we first worked on it 5 years ago or whatever, I think originally the thought was if we need to expand the business, core business area, which right now there's like no vacancy, or maybe one vacancy, right? If we need more space to accommodate future businesses, where does it go? Does it go farther north on Fifth, or does it start going to Maple and some of the side suites, or Fourth and Sixth, and keep it a little bit more compact to the south and not farther to the north? I was hearing pretty clearly from talking to residents and everybody that you really didn't want a lot of the more intense commercial going farther to the north, okay? So if we don't do that, maybe we do need to think about it expanding a little bit east and west. So that's to the point.
And those are kind of the difference between option A, B, and C. You know,
Yeah.
option A has the widest, B is shaved down a little bit more. C, you have the longest, more linear.
Yeah, but B encroaches more into the neighborhood.
For sure it does.
Yeah,
goes
it
all
does.
the way to
He does.
Maple.
He does.
I mean, that's the whole neighborhood. I mean, once you get to Maple, there's only 100 block on 10th and 11th. There's nothing else. Residential is the park.
Yeah, quite frankly.
C
think
or
about this,
B?
But that also takes advantage of the
B.
existing infrastructure.
How does it
like
encroach more
parks.
into Maple?
And also create an
Oh, I
opportunity
see.
for that
Yeah, I see.
residential
I see.
feel,
I see.
walking, pedestrian type activity, lending itself to rolling into Fifth Street, right? So it makes sense kind of almost economically because we have a lot of nice stuff there. The city's continuing to make improvements, like with the park and stuff. The brand new street going into the park, all those things would enhance that.
Absolutely.
It would make sense.
Yep. Yep.
It would actually improve the values and the homes that are in there that are really dumpy.
Absolutely.
Mike, I've just got a clarification between
Yes.
various options. It appears to me that
11th Street.
100 block in option C is more correctly shown than either of the other two options.
Yeah, that's a code.
The mixed use already goes to Locust Street in
Yeah.
that whole block. So that one is to the extent of the mixed use than any of the other two.
Yeah. The zoning allows for it all the way up to
The
5.
zoning does, but as far as what's
The actual use
plans
today.
Yeah, because I think there's only like two houses in the 400 block that are residential.
One now.
There's just one now next to the lobby.
Is that option C, Scott?
Yes.
Ah, okay, I
Option
see.
C doesn't
That
resident.
option C.
It's on railroad.
Would it be easier, kind of thought about and work on just the mixed use area and then come to the transitional area and then talk about railroad or something like that? Would that make more sense? Kind of some consensus here?
I think we need to make sure we're all looking at the same part of the map, because I think we have different people who are looking at.
Let's just look at the mixed use area on what point with that right now. So here's 3 options, right?
For expansion.
Taking it all the way up to the 400 block up to Locust, but pretty linear except for the 100 block essentially.
You're gonna help if I zoom in.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
That's gonna.
yeah.
We'll do this. We'll just zoom straight in.
there's like a pointer. It doesn't work on a television, so. Okay. All right, so that's option C. Now let's go to option, I can't see my letters.
That's B.
This is B?
Yep.
All right.
And what's the difference?
Yeah.
A.
Let's just start.
Okay, okay.
So you flip it down.
ABC.
All right, I'm all the way back now, all right, so that's, is this A? Zoom out real quick, so I can see what I got.
That's option B.
All right, all right, now.
So that's option A. We'll zoom.
All right, so option A. Big things with that was I included just the properties in front of Walnut with the 400 block, but I didn't go all the way up the full block with the commercial there. And I did take it all the way out to 4th and 6th. In that area, so it's more compact, I guess. but not-
And again, to give people an idea for landmarks, this right here that's the parking lot on Sixth Street that we have there. We have this right here, what's just south of that's where we are now.
Services, yeah.
This is Human Services. So if you kind of look for those landmarks as you're looking at the maps, might help a little bit there.
It just needs to be extended up.
Yeah, so with this one,
Sorry, go ahead.
I think this is a good representation other than just extending it up to
Farther
local.
north.
Yeah, because over here on the far left, west of 6th and Maple, you have Nostalgia business that's operating there. And then over on the far right is basically the end of Railroad Park. And so you have all those businesses by the parking lot, including Roses and 401 Railroad that the gentleman just spoke to last night. So I think including those in the district in that area would be good. And then extending it up to local, incorporate, I think there's a golf course guy up there, Red House is up there, the post office up there. There's a quilting store up there and everything in Long Beach, Chicana. So I think that would be a wise decision.
Okay, if everybody agrees with that, we're done. Other thoughts and comments on that suggestion of basically this, except extending it all the way up
It's
to.
just A.
That's option A.
Yeah, I agree. To option B, it extends opportunities to create incentives and things like that to like fixing up their homes. Like our new mayor's talking about $15,000 investments in houses for stuff like that. So it would help lend itself to kind of letting people take advantage of those other opportunities there, as well as the city services that are in place.
So I just added option B to the screen. So we just talked about option A. And we had a little bit of opinion on it. So this is option B. Ralph just gave us a comment. Thank you for that. And so let's continue the conversation on option B and weigh it out.
Option B is the same as Ben saying. Option B, the only residential area, if I'm correct, is on 9th, 10th and 11th.
We're
Actually,
actually
now,
red area right now.
about
Oh, okay,
the red.
okay.
The mixed use. Come back.
I'm on it, okay.
Are there any strong feelings for option B, the red?
I just think just the drawing because the red is on option B. And option A.
So I think I'm gonna go with what Meredith was suggesting, and it's basically option A, except taking that red all the way up to Locust. So we include all of the 100 block. Does anybody object to that?
That's currently what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much, except that when you have other two in there. Yes, it's essentially what it is. It's not taking it farther north. Okay. All right, let's look at probably the most controversial one, which is the railroad one, right? Let's go back to, all right, do you want to expand it all the way to Maple, or do you want to keep it much closer to Railroad Avenue?
Say keep it.
Railroad.
Closer to railroad.
All right, do you want to go ahead and delete the stuff down here that is single family zoning right now and pull that back? I think Vicky's saying yes.
Keep from single family.
Yeah.
Yes, and not change the zoning.
Yeah.
This makes a sense.
So I'm gonna pull this back, I'm gonna keep it down here and then show the area south of Railroad, if you could, on the screen.
Question.
Yeah.
What do we talk about in terms of the depth there? Is there enough there for somebody to use it?
I'm gonna have to look at that a little bit closer. This is just kind of a quick thing on an air photo,
That's
right?
why they. that's why-
But it's probably gonna have to be at least 3 lots deep, maybe 4 in there.
Right now, the zoning goes 3 lots deep on the commercial that's along Railroad.
That's only to 9th Street, Correct.
I'm going from First to 9th.
1st and 9th. Mhm.
Don't be shy, speak up.
And then I'm gonna take this railroad, and I'm gonna go ahead and include, I'm gonna include those lots that we just looked at over there at, Lincoln and First, right?
And actually, not to be particular here, but I know that we just dealt with the mixed use. There's been people that have been giving their opinions, but we haven't heard from everybody. So maybe we should actually take a vote on what was just kind of agreed upon so that we can have it clear.
For the record.
So if you don't mind, can you explain what we're doing and?
Can you go back
have an
to,
actual
yeah,
vote?
option A? So in terms of the mixed use area, what we're gonna vote on is yes or no. It's showing the mixed use as it shows here, except go ahead and extending it on up to include all of the 400 block up to Locust.
Which is basically option C.
Yes.
Yeah, except that this is a little bit wider.
Because C goes to Vine, doesn't it? Go ahead.
Oh, C goes,
Oh, just, no, actually, it does.
goes to Locust.
Narrower, yeah.
Yeah, but it's narrower. C is
Yeah.
narrower. We're saying we want it wider. So I think it's A, except taking it up to Locust.
Like A plus C.
And
All
how,
right.
So is there, are we voting by hands or you want to do an actual vote?
We can do roll call vote or vote by hand. Ali,
Okay, so
can I again get an understanding? Mixed use is going all the way to Locust,
correct.
but it's not moving over into the transitional areas,
Nope.
correct?
Everything is staying the same. It's just we're extending it up to Locust in option A for mixed use. Is there a motion on the floor to accept the mixed use as option A, but extending it up to Locust?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
I second that.
Yep. And then, do you want to go ahead and do roll call vote, Christine? Or, or we can just do a vocal vote too. All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, then option A for mixed use, was extending it up to Locust is passed.
so we'll show that as a unanimous vote. Then since we didn't hear any objections or abstentions.
Okay, railroad. I think what we're saying is we're gonna scale it back here. We're gonna keep it about 3 lots deep off of Railroad. We're gonna include the additional space on the other side of 11th and include the property at Lincoln and First there in the Railroad Avenue corridor.
No expansion. I think again, Clyde said First and Ninth. I think those two different areas, okay, and maybe that's the way we should look at it. Because once you pass 9th Street, you have a totally different type of setup, because currently First and Ninth, you are looking at commercial
That's
use.
what we're talking about right now.
Okay, then make it clear, First and Ninth. That's what you're talking about, okay?
And so from 9th on through 13th, we're looking at what with that option?
Well, let's just do the MA.
Okay, so I'm gonna control this. I wanna look at something real quick. In terms of the existing zone.
You be good on taking it to 11.
It's not the one.
Commercial.
Yeah, it does include.
Closer.
Can I match this? Would that make sense to include the corner there of 9th or should that be residential too?
No, that's commercial right now.
That's what I thought, right? So that's why I would match that.
Already been to clean it up. So if you just not. They did it.
Is there any discussion on the Railroad Avenue?
Did you know that?
Yeah, that's more or less, except this pulled back,
Okay.
including that, including that.
So options.
Is there a reason why you can't break that the bar on the west
Oh,
side?
you can do whatever you want.
Right, so why wouldn't we do that?
So I'm taking it, I'm stopping it here is what we're saying, but do you want to break it another way?
I feel like that's what other discussions are maybe trying to get at or something. I don't know, like, yes.
Go away.
Okay.
Here would go away. I don't know what
So
we're-
from 9th west?
Well, no, we keep the commercial on the west corner there. So from the alley, basically behind 9th on, that goes away.
In other words, it matches zoning map, Brad.
Yeah.
It would match what's currently there, correct?
That's what,
And I really think the history states why. It's not just because I live in that area, grew up in that area.
No, you're right.
But there's a history from 10th to 12th Street that says the best use is not to have commercial there.
Okay.
And it just came up in the paper again last week, so it looks like every 20 years, we're coming with same problems, forever chemicals. So we don't even know if it's safe to be living in that area.
Okay, so we need a motion.
So is there a motion for the Railroad Avenue area to basically match the current zoning with the addition of west of South 11th area and then the south of Railroad by 63rd area?
I had a question first. Is there any, would it be possible, or is there any stomach for pushing it up to Maple when you get closest to, like, say, between 7th and 4th or something? So it's not just a half block strip all the way? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right, can you zoom in on that area on 7th or like 6th, 7th Street?
The home there.
Maple Railroad.
Essentially, rather than have a half block strip of RA all along Railroad, would it make sense to have it be a full block deeper once you got closer, adjacent to the mixed use? Sorry.
Yeah, those are
Kind of step into it? I don't know.
Okay.
Like between 7th and 6th?
Yeah,
Is that?
yeah, like 7th and
Question,
4th or something.
doesn't it make sense from an infrastructure? Go with what he's
Yeah,
recommending,
just,
because you have ingress.
yeah, like a little bit
You
deeper.
have a whole lot of stuff already there. So if we're gonna squinch it up, take it back a little bit deeper, it would afford us to give us more frontage with taking up less space and creating more versatility with. Right.
And
I see what you're saying.
increase Railroad up to Maple on 4th Street.
Between.
Yeah, potentially.
Mhm.
So you end up, instead of having red and blue be a T, upside down T, it's more like a triangle.
To put it up.
That's,
Starting at 9th Street, you go up to Maple, and that would clear 9th, 10th, and 11th Street for residential. And then everybody, it all fits with the streets and all that kind of stuff.
Maybe what's the current zoning there now?
Commercial buildings all the way along here.
Does that change the current zoning?
Residential too, it depends on.
Potentially, it could.
Yeah, potentially.
There is zone down there right now.
Yeah.
On 9th Street?
Yeah.
I recommend it.
Steve, what are you saying?
not that far west.
Mhm.
Oh,
Talking about 7th area.
He's saying 6.
And here, thing.
Yeah.
Here, maybe, right?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
Extending railroad up there or leaving it transition?
I think he's saying maybe we'll swing railroad here and railroad up there.
Right.
So that, this block and that block
Become red.
would become
Blue,
purple.
Or you going to 100 or 200 block?
just the one.
So there's no protection at that point.
Yeah.
It's like you come out of there and we have commercial buildings going down 7th and 4th.
hear what I'm saying?
That seems odd.
Hey, let's think about, I like where you're going, Nate, but.
Yeah, I'm with her on this. We cut it out down there. Let's not start pushing it there.
I'm
Full of
not
residents.
saying, I'm just asking the question.
That's knocking on my door.
I mean, in transitional, you can still have some mixed use activity, but it probably will be less intense than if it was railroad.
I just want to think. I'm a visual person, so like 6th Street, let's say if you go up 6th Street, okay, we have the center and you already have like commercial or mixed use. But when you get to 7th Street,
Get the Mission and Clearwater and it's all residential.
Again, water, and then everything north of there is residential.
So it'd be could potentially change the character of that area if you allow that change.
well, I would be for taking it to 6th and not stretching it over to 7th.
And I'm not saying, I'm just asking the question. I'm not,
Well, it's just open for discussion.
Ask those questions.
It's fair discussion.
Absolutely.
But to think about it, when we're here speaking on behalf of the residents,
Absolutely.
Yes.
6, you're not affecting residents. But when you get on 7th Street, the old, I don't know what it is now, but the Baptist Mission, isn't that commercial now? That corner right there on,
That would be.
North end of Culligan.
and it's only that, and the rest is residential, north?
That's right.
I think my vote would be to keep it residential north. But on 6, go ahead and move it up.
Because you just got really the county and the, Aaron's operation,
Well, the 6 would be mixed use.
6, so.
Yeah, 6 would be mixed use.
Okay, so 6
I know.
stay mixed use,
Okay.
tomato, so
How about a consensus, one way or another, on including these two blocks as railroad or not? No, see, shake your head, one way or another, yeah, up or down, no. All right, so I'm hearing no, all right, so. Then I think our vote is for the RA area is to remove it here and keep that residential, but go ahead and include those two areas south of Railroad that we talked about. And otherwise, it'll be that strip along there about 3 blocks deep.
9th would still be residential too.
Well,
9th,
the corner that's already commercial on the other side of 9th, so that would still stay in RA, but everything past the alley essentially, which is currently residential, will
That
stay
is-
residential.
that is.
Is there a motion to support that? So basically, it would be the current zoning of Railroad right now with the addition of the South 11th area and then the south of Railroad, other little area down there. Anyone want to move the motion?
Who made the motion?
No one has made the motion yet.
Vicky gave it the nod.
So move.
Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vince, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, and the motion carries.
Is that on A?
No, not on this. We were doing option A.
We will get you all map showing what we did so that you can take a look at it and it doesn't say we can't massage it a little.
Absolutely. Right.
But we're
This is-
keeping it residential as it is. We're not changing that zoning area is what we moved.
Current proposal, that's correct.
Okay.
All right, since A was the closest we have on mixed use commercial, let's start with A in terms of looking at the transitional areas. Okay, so this concept, as it shows, does allow a little bit of expansion of transitional up in this area, essentially up to the alley between 8. Okay, and then it has it going up 6th. Well, we've got this is now, is this the right one?
No, that's.
Give me A.
That's not it.
Oh, or I can maybe.
I got you.
You got it?
Just leave it.
All right, so that's fine. Stop there. All right, so go back up so we can see it real quick. So transitional would be the block, the 500 block, a 5th. We're gonna go ahead and include that commercial structure up here that we just talked about that we missed earlier. Then kind of scroll down.
Over there, that one, is that going to be a transitional or is that MUC?
Deserves to speak.
Where Foodware Flair is.
Yeah, I've got it as mixed use.
Oh,
Those do this, right? Okay, yes.
Wait, don't do that or
Okay,
do?
let's get you do. So from transitional would be from Walnut down.
Right now, this corner at 4th and Walnut, that corner is part of the mixed use, okay?
Right.
Then we got transitional down 4th. And on 6th, down behind it. So I guess let's. One thing happens is, this one here up to, whatever the next street is, well, basically, Locust,
That's
up to Locust. One of the options had that area as transitional as well.
which is right across from
Phoenix.
Phoenix.
It is, right.
That's option C if you're looking at.
You think that area should be the transition? That was that question. I can tell you, I mean, when we did the master plan last time, we did think about some additional development on the Phoenix property, and I know that got some back from the neighborhood. I still think it's an idea worth considering. You may not want to do it, and that's okay. That's why we're asking, but that was the idea behind showing some of that as transitional, as potential opportunities for a denser housing product in that.
So where is the transitional stretching to now? Walnut?
I'm waiting, option C, which transitional is here, this option doesn't. That area.
I would want this, short transitional for future use. It opens.
Well, with Phoenix, that makes sense. And then the other thing that we talked about, conversations about storybook housing over by Phoenix. Your little row house that would be period style.
Yeah, that would be exactly what I'm thinking. Area.
I think you have to leave that,
So include that area as transitional?
so,
Awesome. All right, so then going down, 4 and 6, basically that area, then so go on down. Good. Yep. So then the other option, in one of the schemes, we did show a little bit of additional, I think in this area up to 8 is transition. So
That's option C again.
option C, to include this area here is transition.
okay, a transitional meaning again.
Meaning that it could be a little bit more intense than single family. You could convert some of those properties to commercial use. Could convert some of them to multifamily use, that kind of thing. But probably, I mean, it's not gonna be a 3 or 4 story building. It's gonna be, you know, a duplex or type of thing.
And I want to, if I can add one thing, something that makes Valley Junction unique is that for many years or decades, it's been an incubator for small businesses to get their foothold here in West Des Moines. The thing that's happening that we're seeing is that it's very hard to get commercial space on pivot. And so some of the ideas behind the transitional area is that you can have a small business start up their business in one of these homes and then grow. That's something that could possibly keep the tradition that we have going on here in Valley Junction to continue. So I'm only saying that because I think I'm getting a feeling that some people think traditional or this traditional district is commercial. It's not. It's something that, you know, we're seeing smaller to us. I'm sure they come to, you know, where are they going to get their foothold? Where can they get a place that is reasonable in cost, start up small, and then build into something bigger?
And kind of along what Brad was talking about, what we've seen, and if you go look, like particularly in the 400 and 500 block where you've had a residence converted, it's typically an office use. And that gives a relief valve so that you're not having office uses take ground floor space in the 100 and 200 blocks.
So you're recommending that to extend out to which street? Just to,
It shows on option C, right? So just be to the alley between 8th and 9th.
And I think option C shows what you're trying to describe.
Exactly.
so it would be the alley between 8th and 9th. So that means we're saying that those residential properties in that area at any given time, depending on the homeowner, or if, you know, someone purchases, they can use it for either small office use, business use, commercial use. So we're mixing possibly commercial use within the residential.
And just so everybody knows too, it's not like, you know, one day, okay, I'm going to buy the property, I'm going to put an office in it. They have to go through an approval process because that's a change of use. And that means that they've got to go through a site plan approval process through Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council. So there's plenty of opportunities for the public to say, and what they're proposed to do is going to have a major impact on what I'm, you know, on me. So therefore I don't like that. And people then can voice that comment to Plan and Zoning Commission and City Council.
Do we have that throughout any other part of the city?
Yeah, I mean, if there's a change of use on property, they have to go through site plan.
I mean, you have offices within residential neighborhoods in other parts of the city.
Let me think here.
I'm just,
We do on our neighborhood. I mean, we have a lot of people have offices.
Yeah, well,
There's a hydroponics farm in the back of my house.
where you live.
That's city, okay,
Yeah, that's more of a home occupation
729th Fifth Street.
as opposed to what you're talking about, Ralph, is somebody lives there and they have an office. But what we're talking about is somebody could buy a single family resident and then
just have a pure office there and nobody lives there.
Kind of some examples of this. I just thought of a few off the top of my head. So right now, where would we have somebody that wants to do hair? Either a hair salon, real small, a chair or two, where would they go? Somebody that has a small tax service
Bakery.
and they want to have, buy a property or something like that. There's people that are interested in doing coding, as far as creating apps and things of that nature. And there's a couple of guys that get together and they buy a home and then they're working out of that. Those lower intense type uses don't necessarily offend. And so that's where if it doesn't create a major impact to the neighborhood, that's the intent of this transitional type of a thing.
Okay, so, and I
That makes
understand what you're saying. I worked with that in the city of Des Moines. Does West Des Moines have it now? It's like opticians or say like you have an accountant office, but there's usually some type of criteria as it can't be more than 2 employees. So would it be, because then you're gonna get into parking issues coming into the neighborhood, next door to a resident, to the family. So does the city currently have in the zoning where you can operate out of your home if you have a certain type of business?
Yeah, yes, you can, but you have to be the homeowner that lives there too.
Right. This is talking about a new thing. This is talking about some type of business transition district, I would call it.
I know.
Where it can be exclusively commercial, but it has to fit the residential character of the area. So we got to be really sensitive in terms of where you do handle the parking and all those kind of things. So it's a bit different than what you've got.
And I'm here, as you know, I'm an advocate for the residents. So I'm concerned about business, commercial use coming down into residential use where it's primary residential. We look, 6th Street is a good example. You don't have a lot of residential. Once you get past 7th Street, going west, I think you're talking about quite a few residentials.
It would be a change, it potentially could be a change from what's out there now if we did this. I'm not saying we have to, I'm just saying we want to provide that option.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I guess I don't have a super strong opinion on whether or not it should be transitional or not. But the variable that I think is that this one's hard economically, I guess, because you need businesses that can do the startup, low cost buildings that are already built, that are small houses are easy. But you're also going to be removing housing stock from being available for people to live in. I feel like the only thing that it puts it in a really weird position where, like, if you're going to put businesses like kind of bordering residential, it's either mixed use or single family, because if you're just doing transitional, you're just pulling houses out of housing stock for businesses. Like, you should have just done like a 2-story and put someone to live on top and someone to work on the bottom. I think is a better use of land and serves both purposes. But I know that's, now you're talking about 2.5-story type things. So this one's tough. I'm having a hard time envisioning like the side effects of it.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on, in the transitional area, if I'm understanding this correctly, Mike, somebody could buy a piece of property, clear the property, and then do a mixed-use building on it. Okay? Scale on what you would see, say, on Fifth Street.
Not like 11 units or something like that. Like
Right.
4,
Yeah,
whatever.
or
3.
2 units or something like that.
Like the apartment on 4th.
Yeah, I mean, in the planning literature, they talk a lot about missing middle housing types, right? But it's not a big apartment, it's not a 200-unit apartment complex like you might see out farther west. It's not even 11 or 12 units, probably more like a 4, maybe 6 tops.
Is there any kind of more nuanced zoning around multi-use residential, and that's all that you allow if someone wants to do that, and like you don't allow people to do whole houses out of the housing stock in terms
of that zoning category now, some of them we haven't got in the zoning yet, but your RM district, right? The residential medium density,
that's what that, okay.
Could be that.
Does the zoning, if I'm just asking this question, the zoning as it is allowed for Airbnb as long as the property owner lives in the house, correct? Anywhere in the.
In terms of an office use, yes.
Excuse me?
You said Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Airbnb.
If the owner of the property
Lives.
lives
Lives
there,
there.
they can rent out, just basically like the
Anywhere.
typical bed and breakfast, Bob Newhart back in the 80s.
Yeah,
that sort of
they have to live
Airbnb.
there. They have-
But
That
they
kind of
can
thing.
do that now, because I remember the city did, adopted a code to address that problem, but the owner has to live in it.
Live there.
Correct, yeah, because we had issues with, hey, renting a house out, nobody around, and it's a party house.
Yeah.
So this is, as Mitch said, it comes down to the study before it talked about how the housing were kind of landlocked.
Yeah.
And that's why some recommendations were made before. So I'm concerned about taking away residential
Yeah.
properties.
Right.
Um,
How about we kind of put a hold on the transitional? Let me show you what the guidelines are gonna look like for that area, and we can come back and fill in a map. Where it goes. I think we've got a good handle on it. We were thinking for the railroad, I think we got a good handle on the mixed use. I'm fine with just coming back at the next meeting and talking more specifically. We'll get a better picture of what that actually is. That makes sense.
what do you think?
Yeah.
Before we move on, Nick, you had your hand up for a little.
No, Clyde did.
That's like.
Okay,
That's
perfect.
right.
Got it. Question on,
Can I
might get to it with the guidelines, but would that allow more like townhomes and everything too?
Yes.
Okay, because the townhomes,
Transitional wood.
yeah, because like the townhomes right along Sixth are great, the townhomes on Maple are great. And I think that's a great alternative, like, because people want to live down here. Maybe they can't, buy a house or anything, but they want something bigger than a 600 square foot apartment, if they have a family. So that might be a nice addition to the area.
But wouldn't the zoning allow for that currently?
In some of those areas, yeah, where it's medium density residential.
So as I'm understanding it, because they are here on Sixth and they are on Maple, seem like the zoning would allow. I like that use.
Yeah. See,
Because
that's
it's
like.
no residential. I don't have problems with
And Mike, Aaron,
adding. I just don't want to take away residential opportunity, affordable housing opportunity.
I think we've advanced the idea of the space and everything. I'd like your recommendation to come back with guidelines. So we can get a better idea of what's going on.
Keeping my mouth shut. You hear me?
Yeah, I was just going to chime in and say, based on the feedback, it sounds like the concern is with the mixed use, and the transitional feedback that came through wasn't as strong on mixed use. It was stronger on the residential. It was stronger on the townhomes, the row homes, having that traditional live work kind of feel, but not necessarily the mixed use. So yeah, I think that can be something that we make sure we retain within the guidelines, and that maybe that use does come out of the transitional.
Thanks, Aaron.
Okay, so we'll come back to that.
All right, so that's good. So can you go back to the overview?
Yeah.
All right, so that's enough on districts, other than, almost. Back now. All right, so we're gonna talk about zoning, and there's absolutely a correlation between what the guidelines are and what the zoning are, but not an important, take a couple minutes just to think about the existing zoning that's out here in this, right? So we've got some residential zoning categories. We've got, most of the area is in the Valley Junction. We've been talking about traditional homes, smaller lots than you might have in other parts of town. Unique character, for sure, and a nice variety. We've got a residential mixed use, which is most often got townhomes density. We've got the residential high density, which in this area is really more, type anyway, right? It's really not, it's not a big apartment complex, it's smaller scale, but those are the residential categories, and that's really the yellow and brownish shades on your map, and you got all this in your packet already. We've got the historic Valley Junction, Valley Junction historic business, which is, allowing up to 36 feet in height, the traditional character of the area. does not, this is the only zone in the community, I think, that doesn't have a parking requirement attached to it because the city has so much parking in this particular area already. And it does currently, as zoned, go all the way up to Vine. Then you've got Valley Junction Light Industry, which is the area north of Railroad around 13th in that zone, just south of the big park in that area, which is kind of smaller light industrial areas. And it's kind of unique community. You want a business park zoning, which is really this one applicable lot here, just south of the business district. General industrial here, which is Fox Brewing and a lot of those smaller industrial areas in there. And then you've got some areas that are zone plan development, which are specific approvals based on a specific plan for the area, right? So you've got Phoenix redevelopment that happened in the Valley Green project. You've got the Foundry in the hall in there. Then you've got that Lincoln Street Park area, which includes those senior apartments that are in that area that were developed a few years back.
From the Heartland.
Yeah, the Heartland Food Bank facility too, absolutely part of that. So those all have essentially their own zoning regulations for as to what you can do in those areas. So in looking at that, I don't think we're going to make radical changes to that, but I think we are probably going to do that. Typically, I should have put this first. Right? But when we're talking about the design guidelines, what we're going to do is essentially create an overlay. That won't be this shape because we just changed that shape, right? All right, but it's going to have an overlay that says that when you're doing development in any area within an overlay, you need to look at that design guideline book to look at what the architecture is going to should look like, what the landscape treatment should look like, and all those kind of things. So it's going to be essentially an overlay over several different specific zoning regulations. So zoning is going to control the use of the land. The overlay is going to be much more focused on the appearance of the development in that area.
And if I can jump in, so Ralph, this ties into what you were asking yesterday, as far as if there's a district or rules for like around Jordan Creek and Mill Civic, things like that. There is a Jordan Creek kind of overlay district that has that type of standards to it. So it's a similar type of approach.
These are going to be a whole lot more detailed because Jordan Creek basically just says, hey, we want to allow you flexibility to do these types of things. And you have to come in with a specific plan for a group of parcels. Here, each individual, everything within that boundary that Mike just talked about, you're going to have very specific design standards for that property.
That all makes sense. This is an important thing that you guys get. Okay, everybody get that?
A similar approach.
All right.
May I? I'm sorry. Isn't there's something unique about historic Valley Junction as it comes to design planning, setbacks and, okay. We'll talk about that.
All right, in terms of the zoning that's out there right now in areas, I think we want to give some additional thought to, as we're talking about the area. Well, now we've cut it. The area on 5th and 4th between Locust and Vine, essentially. I think we may want to ultimately think about rezoning that area to less intense potential use. Keep it right in that character and whatever. So maybe that's this new business transitional district, or maybe it goes back to residential. Not sure quite yet exactly what, but I think it does need to be different than what it is today. Where we're looking at the railroad design standards, right? I think that may require some modification to the zoning that's right on railroad. So I think ultimately we may suggest some zoning changes there.
Such as?
While allowing for more of mixed use type of development that we've been talking about, right? So the images you saw in the visual preference survey yesterday that had railroad on it, those type of things.
Up to 9th Street?
Yes, yeah. We can
Thank
scale back the area where that would happen, absolutely.
Thank you.
And then that site C down here, really, obviously, as zone business park, that property owner has got the right to do his industrial business park type of development if he chooses to do that. Not taking anything away from him. I do want to encourage him to think about some alternate uses in that area, though. We've talked about where is an opportunity for some more apartments? Where is there an opportunity for a hotel? Maybe it's there, maybe it's that property with Lincoln and First. I don't know, but I think I want to have those options available and part of the conversation. So those are some areas where we might suggest some changes in zoning to the area. I know in terms of the single family Valley Junction area, I don't think I might suggest anything in terms of the lot standards or the setbacks or any of that kind of stuff. That probably stays just the way it is. If there's something specific you want us to look at in terms of the zoning requirements that are in place now in the other districts, let me know. I'm going to give some more thought to that after we've gone through this whole visual preference survey. We may propose some. But right now, these are the areas from a zoning map perspective that I think we might want to look at ultimately changing. And having said that, the only one that I might push for being done kind of wholesale right now is that 500 block of Fifth Street up there. That one maybe should be modified. These other ones are probably much more developer, property owner driven. When they want to do something, if it's consistent with our plan, they would come in and propose the rezoning. We would probably approve it because it's consistent with the master plan, but it would be much more developer driven.
FYI, they're very flexible developers.
Oh, that's good.
Do what's in the best interest of Valley Junction.
Very good. It's good to know.
Question.
Oh, go ahead, Steve, and then we'll go ahead, Nick.
In terms of use, one thing that was brought up a little bit ago is the Airbnb. Would it be, this does have an impact on the actual residential rental apartments, but would it be possible to carve out within that mixed use area? So Airbnbs would be allowed, say on the second floor along Fifth Street. Because since we have no lodging now.
Yes. All right. So look, this slide, here we go. Okay. There was a few things I wanted to keep talking about. Airbnb was one of them. In my mind, we saw in the Small Nation presentation, right, that some of those upper story spaces were being used for Airbnbs. There wasn't anybody living in that property, which would be a violation of your code as it is today.
Right.
But in your historic business district, would it be okay if you just had an Airbnb without a resident living there? I think so. So I think that is the change that we might want to look at in that particular district. I'm seeing nodding heads, so I'm going to assume that's good. All right, cool. Another one I wanted to bring up to you was the idea of accessory dwelling units. Another big thing that's done in a lot of communities these days, a big push for that kind of thing. It may make sense in this area. Essentially, an accessory dwelling unit is pretty much what it says, right? It's having another dwelling unit on your property that you could have available for your in-laws, if that happens to still be separate if you wanted to. It could be rented out to a college student or something like that. So it would be another source of potential income for the resident, allow some additional people to live in this area while still certainly maintaining the residential character of the area and making sure that you're not overly intensifying.
What Mike's talking about in a lot of areas, what somebody will do is build a garage and then build a residential unit above the garage. And the garage is typically detached.
Right.
And they're renting then that apartment, for lack of a better term, above the garage out. Or it's where a lot of people refer to them as granny flats, where a relative lives.
We just did a guideline for the city of Evanston on these things. I'm going to email you guys a link to that so you can see that and give some thought to it. I don't want an answer necessarily on that topic yet, but I do want something I do want you to think about.
And it's something I just want to point out that's not necessarily unique. I mean, it's something that it's been done here in Valley Junction before. So one of the last standing examples of it is right behind Coffee Cats. That was the garage that was transformed. That's an example of an accessory use. You have the apartments that are above Coffee Cats, and then you have the accessory unit that's in the back. having more of that helps kind of bring some more vibrancy to the community, and it's something that was historically done. We already see an example of it.
Can I just ask, because it can go to the limits, in Minneapolis, I noticed that they are converting garages to like accessory uses. With that, I mean, people are more and more living, using garages as accessory dwelling units. So is that,
We still
it
have.
may not be the top loft of the garage, but I've seen like in
We
Minneapolis.
still have the issue, though, that within this area, you have to have a garage and a half for a residential unit. And if somebody's converting their garage and they don't have any other covered parking, then technically they're in violation of city code.
Maybe we need to change that.
Obviously, we can get the right rules, however it fits your area, okay? But my gut reaction would be a unit over the garage, probably okay.
Yeah.
Garage to a unit, probably not okay, because still got to park.
So you're gonna have a lot of.
It's gonna invite a lot
We're
of
doing
things
it
with that.
now and we're complaining about it.
People living in the.
Going back to your transition, what, under what zoning,
Using heaters?
building zoning would that?
It was like.
Yeah, great question, right? So
She had family that, was actually, they was in my garage.
Okay.
Had to put.
it could be several different things. I'm not trying to give you a, but potentially in terms of zoning in a transitional area, you could have a couple of different things. You could have the residential medium density, right? If it was a townhome type of product. It could be a planned development where we come in with some smaller single family homes that they'll fit the character of the area, but they're single family. It could be a new type of district, a business transitional district that I'm talking about that is focused primarily on single family, but does allow conversion of some of those homes to commercial businesses. So there could be multiple zonings in a transitional area while still meeting the appearance guidelines that are outlined for transitional.
So if someone would come in, tear down 3 lots, want to put in a business with residential up above, that fall under commercial, or would we use the Valley Junction historic business where parking wouldn't be required or setback?
Or it could be a new type of district.
Be a mixed use type of zone, something totally different than what we have right now.
Yeah. My brain is probably going to a different district, honestly, what I'm envisioning for that area. It's going to help to see the guidelines and correlate the two things, but it certainly does not have to be, it does not have to match one of your existing categories. It could be something different to accommodate some different type of development.
And Mike's straight here. Nick, one of the things I think we would have to take a look at is in that transitional area, what is the parking requirements going to be? You know,
Right.
Because it almost really kind of needs to stand on its own and not be like the main street where you've got public parking lots.
What about setbacks? What about the dump?
That's all things that we've got to figure out.
Rooftop patios, do we want to have provisions to accommodate those, particularly in the historic business district? I think yes.
Yes.
Or to put out there. Okay, good. All right, we will work on that. Well, not too bad. It's only 6:45. Okay, so where we are, we've got a boatload of work to do as you tell the team to work on these guidelines and work on these zoning recommendations and meet the deadlines the city will set for us. In terms of your role, we will be back here on January 26th. We'll have these drafts prior to that, which means I don't have a whole lot of time, but we're gonna, I promise you, I'll get them to you before that date, as soon as, before I can get them to you. I want to give you as much time as you can to have that. We're gonna have a very involved, and I guess plan on probably another really long meeting on the 26th, because you're gonna have a lot of material to go through and discuss and provide me some direction so that then we can come back potentially the next week on February 2nd and be able to reach some consensus of a document that we can then forward on through the process. So for sure, the 26th will be a long meeting. We'll know on the 26th how long the February 2nd meeting is probably going to be, depending on how that conversation goes about the indictment. So that is where we are. I think That's all right? So, that's all I've got.
Any other questions or comments for Mike or Aaron or? No? All right, then I think. we'll go ahead.
Sorry, that's it.
Oh.
On to the bar. Nobody online.
Nobody online? All right. I
A little shorter than I anticipated.